There are 20 Premier League teams. 11 of them have a front of shirt gambling sponsor. 11. What's crazy is none of the big six have them. So those 11 are spread among the remaining 14 clubs. I found that to be wild. So I looked overseas and I saw a completely different picture. Spain banned front of shirt gambling sponsors in football in 2019. So there's 0 over there. Italy did the same thing 2 years later. So there's 0 there too. France has 1. Bundesliga has 2. As I mentioned earlier, the Premier League has 11. Yes, the Premier League also has now banned front of shirt gambling sponsors, but that ban doesn't come into effect until 2026. So why has the Premier League taken so long to react? And is there any surprise about the increase in gambling related instances when gambling is so rife in our league? I'm Jordan. I'm on a mission to make the business of sport more accessible to everyone. There's a lot of business in this one. So strap in, because I'm going to tell you just how important gambling is to our beautiful game. Going back 20 seasons, there was one club in the Premier League with a gambling sponsor. That was Middlesbrough with their classic 888.com kit. That season, there were some classic jerseys. But Borough were the only one with a gambling sponsor. Fast forward 10 seasons from there, we're in 2014-2015, there were a few more. Aston Villa had Dafabet. Stoke had Bet365. On top of those, Swansea had GWFX. West Ham had Alpari. Sunderland were with Bidvest. Those 3 are trading firms. I'm going to group them into the gambling arena. So 6 in total. Today, the 2024-2025 season is crazy. Aston Villa, Bournemouth, Brentford, Crystal Palace, Everton, Fulham, Leicester, Forest, Southampton, West Ham, Wolves. All of them have gambling sponsors. And the crazier thing is just how much money these companies are willing to pay Premier League teams to sponsor them. It's funny because the big 6 are separate. We'll get back to them later in the video. But 10 seasons ago, when West Ham was sponsored by Alpari, they made £3 million a year. Today, West Ham make £12 million a year from Betway. Everton get £15 million a year from Stake. Aston Villa get £20 million a year from Betano. It's lucrative business, so you can see why clubs in the Premier League solicit these types of business to be their primary front of shirt sponsor. Similarly, you can understand why these companies run to the Premier League for market share and exposure. Gambling culture is rife in English football. A recent survey suggested that over 1 million people have gambling problems in the United Kingdom. In addition, an estimated 3.6 million people have been heavily affected by someone else near to them having a gambling issue. So, if I'm a gambling company looking to scale and increase my market share, I know exactly where I'm going. I've mentioned market share a few times. The type of companies that associate themselves with Premier League clubs are typically headquartered internationally, looking to increase their presence in Europe or in the UK specifically. Dafabet are headquartered in the Philippines and were looking to expand their presence in predominantly football-playing countries. They had big tie-ups with Fulham and Aston Villa to achieve that. Fun88 are very similar. They too are headquartered in the Philippines and wanted to grow internationally. They had a tie-up with Newcastle, famously, for a few seasons. And you can see why. The Premier League provides unbelievable visibility. It's also the best league in the world, so there's a brand association that comes with it. That's why these companies are willing to pay 10 to 15 million pounds a year to align themselves with Premier League clubs. There is a level of excellence here, and the culture is rife to convert customers and make their money back. But there is a dark side to gambling. There are quite a few retired footballers going through serious financial issues as a result of gambling. Dietmar Hamann is one. Excellent player, played for Liverpool for a long time. Michael Chopra is another one. He was in deep. Maybe the most highlighted one though is Paul Merson. If you haven't seen it so far, the documentary that he put out was crazy. The sad thing though is it's happening to existing players playing in the Premier League in their primes. Lucas Paqueta, Sandro Tonali, Ivan Toney. These players are all top players currently playing and have suffered bans for gambling offences in recent seasons. The irony being they all play for clubs that had a gambling front of shirt sponsor at the time of their ban. I'm not here to take a morality position left or right. Some of these chaps were betting on games that they were involved in, which in my opinion is a little bit silly. However, can you blame them for being involved in such excessive gambling when the culture for gambling is so rife in our beautiful game? Front of shirts, sleeves, billboards. The English Football League was even sponsored by Sky Bet for a long time. There's a little hypocrisy in there somewhere. Italy recognized this hypocrisy and introduced a ban on sports gambling in 2019. They announced the ban a year earlier in July 2018, and they said, y'all got 12 months to get your thing in order. Good luck. Jay-Z's got a song called Show Me What You Got, and he's got a lyric in it, and he goes, y'all got less than 2 months to get your shit together. Good luck. I don't know whether to incorporate that in here somewhere. Any club that had an existing relationship with a gambling company could let that contract run out, but they could not sign any new gambling sponsors after that date. Cumulatively, across the league, it was reported that 120 million euros were lost in gambling sponsorship money as a result of the ban. The Italian state said,
I'm here to tell you right now, we don't care.
Spain said the same thing 2 years later. They banned sports gambling in an attempt to protect minors and people in vulnerable positions. This too impacted Spanish clubs. Initially, 90 million euros were lost as a result of gambling sponsors coming to an end. The crazy thing is that number increased rapidly because a lot of clubs struggled to get a replacement sponsor in the immediate season after, so several companies started that season without a front of shirt sponsor, increasing the losses to upwards of 110 million euros. But again, that was a few years ago. It feels like the Premier League has dragged their heels by introducing a gambling ban in this country. In fact, there are quite a few differences. I mentioned before, Italy announced in 2018 that the ban is coming. 1 year later, the ban was introduced. Spain did the same thing, announced in the summer of 2020, ban introduced in the summer of 2021. The Premier League, however, said gambling sponsorship is restricted. No gambling sponsors on the front of shirts are allowed, but sleeves are fine. Billboards around the stadium are fine. Training apparel is fine. Also, you've got 3.5 years to figure it out. That warning was so generous that some clubs signed new deals to cash in before the hammer came down. So the question is a simple one. Is the Premier League harming its own clubs by introducing a ban on gambling? Well, let's have a look. West Ham have had 3 sponsors over the last 17 seasons. SBO Bet, Alpari, and Betway. They love a gambling sponsor. Aston Villa are even more prolific. 5 of their last 6 sponsors have been gambling companies. Unibet, 32Red, W88, BK8, and Betano. There are 2 risks here. One, the fact that clubs like these will struggle to find a replacement. I mentioned earlier this happened in Spain. After the ban was introduced, some clubs struggled to find a replacement sponsor. I mentioned before that some of these clubs signed a new deal in the window between the ban announcement and the ban coming into effect. Aston Villa were one of those clubs. They now receive a reported £20 million a year from Betano. It is worth saying Aston Villa are a big club. They are playing in the Champions League, so that sum may seem justified. But will they find a replacement sponsor to give them the same value of money per year? That may be the issue. Will Everton make £15 million a year from stake like they do today? If they don't, then these clubs will make less money every single year, which may make it harder to comply with profit and sustainability rules in the UK. 15 million a year may become 10 million a year. That's a sizable amount of money for a Premier League club to swallow every single year, which is why some clubs are lobbying against this ban. It simply means clubs have to become more efficient and think outside the box to generate revenues to offset the gap in other ways. I personally don't think the Premier League clubs will miss it. The ban affects front of shirt sponsors, but it doesn't affect sleeves. It doesn't affect billboards. It doesn't affect training apparel. I support Manchester United. The training kit is very big business for us, as is the main kit that we wear on match days. It wouldn't surprise me to see sleeve shirt sponsors increase in value very soon, with some gambling companies choosing to go there instead of on the front of shirts. It also wouldn't surprise me to see some non-Big Six clubs sign training apparel deals with gambling sponsors to offset the delta lost from not having them on the front of shirt on their main kit. You can bet your bottom dollar that a Maltese gambling company will definitely be trying. One group of clubs that we haven't spoken about are the Big Six. Have you noticed that they never have a gambling sponsor? Those clubs are big. They compete for trophies every single season. But the key is they have global fan bases. That's why big global brands tend to align with them. They're typically removed and are quite frankly immune from all of the gambling noise. If the smaller clubs do take a little setback commercially from the gambling ban coming into effect in 2026, then one thing that this does do is separate the gap between the Big Six and the rest of the league even more than it is already. That is something to note. I don't think that gap will be that big from this ban, but it is possible that the separation does increase, which I don't think is necessarily a good thing for the league. The final question then is, does the Premier League have a duty to help improve the gambling culture in this country? The Premier League will say, we exist to bring value to our shareholders. But I say yes. And I think they felt pressure, hence why they had to do something. I think what they did is a little box ticky. They said, yes, we're stopping gambling front of shirt sponsors, but you can do it everywhere else. In the stadium, on the sleeves, on the training apparel. We also gave you a very long time to work on it before the ban comes into effect. It's a move, but it's a softer move. However, it's a step in the right direction. Do you guys remember Mansion? They sponsored Spurs famously. They sponsored Bournemouth before as well. They went big on football sponsorship about a decade ago. They went bust in 2022. Football Index sponsored Forest. They sponsored QPR. They too famously went out of business in 2021. Some of the companies sponsoring Premier League clubs have questionable business practices, and the less exposure that the populace and Premier League clubs have to some of these companies, the better. Quite frankly, I think the financial risks are muted. The Premier League clubs will be fine. A bigger win for me would be the Premier League doing more to help players with gambling addictions. I mentioned some players before: Paqueta, Tony, Tonali, Haman, Chopra, Merson. These are the ones that we know about. There's probably players playing right now who are deep in the hole in gambling addictions, and they need help. Maybe it's happening and I don't know about it, but a bigger win for me would be putting in more infrastructure, helping and supporting those who really need it. I'm Jordan. Some business in here today, but a lot of ethics and morality in here too, something I'm not afraid to tackle. If you support this channel, please like this video. You'll be surprised how much it helps me. And if you want to see another problem that the Premier League has, click right here to watch this one.